The rain had settled into a steady drizzle, slicking the city's streets with a sheen of cold reflection. Detective Elias Carr moved cautiously through the twisting alleyways, the worn leather of his trench coat damp against his skin. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, every sense alert to the dangers that lurked beneath the city's veneer of order. Somewhere in the labyrinth of stone and silence lay answers, pieces of a fractured truth that refused to stay buried. He stopped beneath a flickering street lamp, its pale light struggling against the dark. The faint wail of sirens echoed far away, a distant reminder of the city's restless heartbeat. Ahead, the hulking figure of Silas Reed leaned against a brick wall, his tall frame wrapped in a dark leather jacket that seemed to absorb the night itself. Silas's cold gaze met Elias's with an almost casual menace, his presence a living shadow cast long by the city's debts and broken promises. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Silas said, voice low and gravelly, the words slipping out like stones, tumbling down a forgotten quarry. Elias didn't flinch. "You've been busy, Silas. People are disappearing, witnesses silenced. And those stone tablets, they're vanishing too." A bitter smile cracked Silas's face, the glint of teeth like chipped granite. "You think I'm the only one with hands in the dirt? You've got no idea what's really at play." They moved away from the street lamp, slipping into the suffocating shadows of a nearby warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the musty scent of old stone, relics of the city's stubborn obsession with debts carved in permanence. Boxes and broken pallets formed a jagged landscape of forgotten industry. Elias's eyes caught the scattered shards of a shattered tablet on the concrete floor. He knelt, the edges jagged, the faint etching of numbers and names barely visible beneath layers of grime. "These tablets are supposed to be eternal," he murmured. "But someone's been breaking that promise." Silas's gaze darkened. "Victor Gray doesn't tolerate loose ends. Those tablets, they're more than just debts. They're power, and anyone who threatens that power gets removed." Elias's fists clenched at the implication. The murder he was investigating suddenly felt like the surface ripple of a deeper current, one that threatened to pull the city under with it. "And you're the enforcer keeping the current steady." "I'm just the stonecutter," Silas replied, voice cold as chiseled marble, "making sure the ledger stays clean." A sharp noise echoed from outside, the clatter of metal on wet pavements snapping both men to alertness. Elias's hand drifted toward the pistol concealed beneath his coat, while Silas's posture tensed like a predator sensing prey. The shadows seemed to close in tighter, the city's dark underbelly stirring with renewed urgency. "You're playing a dangerous game, Silas," Elias said quietly. "One wrong move and the whole ledger comes crashing down." Silas laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Maybe, but stones don't mend themselves. Sometimes they have to be broken to make way for something new." Elias rose slowly, eyes never leaving Silas. "Then it's time to find out what new order you're building and how many debts it will cost." As he stepped back into the rain-washed streets, the fragments of the shattered tablet weighed heavy in his mind, a stark reminder that in this city, truth was as fragile as stone and just as easily broken. The game was shifting, the shadows deepening, and Elias knew the road ahead would demand more than just grit and wit. It would require him to confront the very debts he'd tried to leave behind. The city whispered around him, each drop of rain a silent echo of promises made and broken. Somewhere beneath the weight of stone and silence, the fragments of truth waited to be found, and Elias was determined they wouldn't stay lost for long. But as the night stretched on, a single question throbbed in his mind. How far would Victor Gray go to protect his empire of erasure? And was Elias ready to face the darkness that answer would bring? The stakes had never been higher, and the stone ledger's shadow loomed larger than ever. He lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the hard lines of his face before the smoke swallowed the light. The game was on, and Elias Carr was ready to play no matter the cost. The rain fell harder now, each drop a steady beat in the symphony of the city's relentless secrets. The rain had not ceased since dawn, and the city wore its usual cloak of gray mist and wet stone. Elias Carr stood outside the battered door of Lena Marsh's bookstore, the faint glow of amber light spilling onto the slick pavement. The worn sign above the entrance swung gently in the chill wind, creaking softly like a whispered secret. He pushed the door open, the scent of musty paper and aged leather enveloping him instantly. Inside, the bookstore was a sanctuary of shadows and whispers. Rows of books leaned precariously on creaking shelves, and stacks of yellowed newspapers and pamphlets cluttered every available surface. At the back, a single desk lamp cast a warm pool of light over a scattering of papers. Lena sat there, her auburn hair catching the glow, eyes sharp behind thin-framed glasses. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of relief and urgency. "You're late," she said softly, sliding a folder across the desk. Elias caught the folder, fingers brushing the edges of brittle papers inside. "Had to shake a tail," he muttered, voice low with caution. Lena's gaze hardened. "They're watching. More closely than before. But what I found, it changes everything." He flipped open the folder, revealing a series of documents, official ledger records, annotations in hurried handwriting, and photocopies of stone tablets, some marked with strange symbols, others conspicuously faded or absent. "These aren't just missing," Elias said, eyes narrowing. "They've been deliberately erased." "Exactly. And not by accident. There's a pattern here, transactions wiped clean. That's vanished overnight. It's systemic manipulation." Outside, the rain hammered against the window pane, the rhythm a steady reminder of the city's relentless pulse. Elias leaned back, the weight of the discovery settling like a stone in his gut. "If this gets out, it'll tear the city apart." Lena nodded. "That's why we have to be careful. But we can't stay silent. People deserve to know the truth." They spent hours sifting through the Forbidden's files, piecing together fragments of a ledger far larger and darker than either had imagined. Names of powerful officials intertwined with shadowy debt collectors, their signatures ghosted over records that should have been immutable. The stone tablets, once symbols of unyielding truth, had been corrupted into instruments of deceit. A sudden noise, a soft scrape against the back door made Elias freeze. He motioned to Lena, and they fell silent, listening. Footsteps echoed faintly in the narrow alley beyond, hesitant yet deliberate. Elias moved toward the door, hand resting on the grip of his concealed weapon beneath his trench coat. The footsteps stopped. A shadow flickered past the cracked glass. Elias's breath caught as a figure slipped into the alley, vanishing into the night. He returned to Lena, voice low but firm. "We're no longer just digging up dirt. We're in the crosshairs." Lena's eyes met his, steady despite the danger. "Then we have to be smarter. We need allies, and we need a plan to get this out without getting ourselves killed." In the cramped back room, Lena gathered her underground network, the ragtag group of journalists, hackers, and whistleblowers who refused to bow to the city's iron grip. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the metallic scent of damp paper. Old typewriters clacked rhythmically, transcribing the Forbidden's truths into manifestos and exposes. Every keystroke was a rebellion, every whispered conversation a vow to dismantle the corruption etched into the city's very foundation. Elias watched from the doorway, the weight of his stone pendant pressing against his chest. The metaphor was not lost on him. This city was built on debts carved in stone. Yet here he stood amid fragile papers and fading ink, fighting to preserve a truth that could vanish as easily as the tablets themselves. Days blurred into nights as Elias and Lena moved through the city's underbelly, avoiding watchful eyes and shadowed threats. They shared terse conversations beneath flickering street lamps and exchanged coded messages through the bookstore's hidden shelves. The veneer of order that once seemed impenetrable now cracked visibly, splintered by the pressure of their revelations. On a rain-slicked rooftop overlooking the sprawling cityscape, Elias and Lena stood side by side. Neon signs flickered below like fractured stones, casting fractured colors across the wet rooftops. The wind tugged at their coats, carrying the distant murmur of a city unsettled. "This is just the beginning," Elias said, eyes scanning the horizon where dark clouds gathered. Lena's expression was resolute. "And if we don't act fast, those stones will be broken beyond repair." A sudden chill ran through Elias, not from the cold, but from the stark truth in her words. Beneath the surface of their city, a storm was brewing, one that threatened to wash away the fragile ledger of justice they both sought to protect. As the first drops of a new rain began to fall, Elias felt the weight of the coming battle settle deep inside him. The debts carved into stone were more than mere numbers. They were the foundation of a society teetering on the edge of collapse. And somewhere in the shadows, those who wished to keep the ledger's secrets buried were closing in. He turned to Lena, a dry, weary smile tugging at his lips. "Ready to see how deep the cracks go?" She returned the smile, fierce and unyielding. Always together. They stepped back from the edge, disappearing into the night where stone and shadow wove their endless dance, each erasure a wound, each revelation a step toward an uncertain dawn. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle by the time Elias Carr found himself standing beneath the flickering glow of a lone street lamp, the dampness of the darkened city seeping into the very marrow of his bones. Before him rose the imposing facade of the city registry, its stone walls etched with the indelible marks of countless debts carved over decades. The cold granite was a silent witness to the lives it had ensnared, to promises made and broken, to fortunes gained and lost beneath its unyielding surface. His fingers brushed lightly against a weathered tablet embedded in the registry's outer wall, tracing the faint grooves where years of rain and neglect had softened the once crisp inscriptions. Each carved symbol told a story, a ledger of obligation and consequence etched in stone. Yet here, amid this permanence, was the irony that gnawed at Elias. The same stone that promised endurance could also be erased, vanishing without a trace once debts were repaid. Or, in some darker cases, forcibly removed, leaving questions that no one dared to answer openly. Elias's eyes narrowed as he considered the vanished tablet of the victim, that impossibility haunting the case like a ghost. The stone had been there one moment, a testament to a man's debts and failings, and then gone erased in a way that defied the city's rigid laws. It was a crack in the system, a fracture in the very foundations of the city's justice. He turned away, the weight of the rain and the city pressing down on his shoulders as he made his way toward a quieter refuge. The familiar scent of aged paper and dust welcomed him as he pushed open the door to Lena Marsh's bookstore, the soft bell overhead announcing his arrival. Among stacks of forbidden literature and whispered rumors, Elias found a moment's respite from the relentless pursuit of truth. Lena looked up from the cluttered desk where she was poring over a set of documents, her sharp eyes meeting his with a mixture of concern and resolve. "You've been out in the cold too long," she said quietly, pushing a steaming cup of coffee toward him. "These papers might give us something new to work with." Elias accepted the cup, the warmth seeping into his chilled hands. He studied the document's ledgers altered, debts erased without authorization, names crossed out like sins scrubbed from memory. The evidence was damning, revealing a web of corruption that stretched far beyond the victim and his vanished tablet. "The more I dig, the more I see how deep this rot goes," Elias murmured. "It's not just a single tablet or a single death. It's the whole system, built on stone but rotten at its core." Lena nodded, her expression hardening. and it's only getting worse. If we don't expose it soon, more stones will crumble, and with them, the truth. The weight of her words lingered as Elias stepped back into the night, the city's shadow swallowing him once more. His next destination was less certain, guided by a lead that had surfaced only hours before a meeting with Clara Bell, the victim's estranged sister, who held secrets buried deep in the fractured past. The old cemetery was a place Elias rarely visited, a silent city of stone and memory, where the deaths of the dead were carved into cold markers that stood as mute sentinels over forgotten lives. Clara awaited him among the cracked headstones, her features pale and drawn, eyes wary but resolute. "You want to know about him," she said without preamble, her voice barely more than a whisper. "About what he owed, and to whom?" Elias nodded, the chill of the night creeping beneath his coat. "Anything you can tell me could make a difference." Their conversation unfolded like a delicate dance of shadows and half-truths, revelations dripping slowly from Clara's guarded lips. She spoke of debts not just financial, but personal bonds broken and promises shattered, the invisible weights that had dragged her brother down into darkness. As they spoke, Elias felt the ghost of his own past stir a reminder of the friend lost to similar debts and violence, a wound that still bled beneath his cynical exterior. The stones around them seemed to echo with sorrow, their silent testimony a haunting counterpoint to the living struggle unfolding in the city's rain-soaked streets. When their meeting ended, Elias lingered on the edge of the cemetery, his hands gripping the cold stone parapet of a nearby bridge. The river below flowed dark and relentless, mirroring the city's unyielding march forward, despite the cracks beneath its surface. Sirens wailed distantly, a reminder that the night's work was far from over. The stone was unforgiving, but so was Elias's resolve. Each vanished tablet was a challenge, each erased debt a call to face the shadows that threatened to swallow the fragile justice he sought to protect. He glanced down at the stone pendant resting against his chest, a talisman and a burden. "Some stones never mend," he whispered to the night, "but I'll be damned if I don't try." And with that, Elias Carr stepped back into the city's darkness, the echoes of stone and erasure guiding him deeper into the labyrinth of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The precinct's office was a crucible of muted colors and whispered secrets. Rain hammered the cracked window panes, a relentless percussion that melded with the steady hum of the old radiator struggling against the chill. Elias Carr sat hunched over a cluttered desk, his sharp eyes scanning a map peppered with red marks, each indicating a missing stone tablet. The ledger was no longer a ledger, but a puzzle, one whose pieces threatened to cut deeper than mere stone. Across from him, Detective Marcus Vale shifted uncomfortably. His stocky frame bore the weight of years spent navigating the city's murky law enforcement waters, his uniform slightly rumpled beneath the coat he seldom removed. "You see this pattern, Elias?" Marcus's voice was gravelly, edged with a reluctant acceptance. "These aren't random disappearances. They're connected high up, too." Elias nodded, fingers tapping rhythmically on the wooden surface. "The stones that vanish aren't just debts erased. They're secrets buried." The two men sat in silence, the gravity of their discovery settling like a stone in their chests. The ledger system, once thought immutable, was being systematically dismantled from within, manipulated by those who held the city's true power. And with each tablet erased, a thread of truth unraveled. Later that night, Elias found himself in a shadowed alley, the scent of wet stone and damp earth mingling with the distant hum of city life. A figure emerged from the darkness, a jittery informant, eyes darting like trapped birds. "You want names," the man whispered, voice trembling. "Their cleaning house." Gray's fingerprints all over it. Elias's gaze sharpened. Who exactly? The informant swallowed hard. Officials, collectors, people who think the ledger's theirs to rewrite. The revelation was a cold slap, But Elias forced himself to remain steady. "Keep your head down." Back at his apartment, Marcus sat alone, the harsh neon glow from the street casting fractured shadows across the sparse room. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the badge resting on the table. Loyalty to the Force warred with the knowing knowledge that the system he upheld was rotting from the core. Could he stand by as justice was twisted into a tool for greed? The question haunted him, a stone lodged deep in his conscience. The following day, beneath the oppressive sky heavy with rain, Elias and Marcus met on a slick street corner. Their voices were low, the tension between them palpable. "We're walking a tightrope," Marcus murmured. "One wrong step and everything falls apart." Elias exhaled slowly. "But if we don't act, the ledger will become nothing more than a monument to lies." Their alliance, once forged in mutual suspicion, now bore the strain of the moral quagmires they faced. Yet beneath the weariness, a hardened resolve flickered, an unyielding determination to pierce the shadows and lay bare the truths carved in stone. As the rain intensified, washing the city in a cold, relentless tide, Elias felt the familiar weight of his stone pendant against his chest, a silent reminder that some debts, like the stones themselves, bore marks that could never fully be erased. The lines between shadows blurred and shifted, but Elias Carr was determined to follow them wherever they led, even if it meant confronting the very system he once believed in. The city's secrets were etched in stone, but their erasure was a crime that could not go unpunished. And in the murky world of debts and deception, justice would demand its due, no matter the cost. The night stretched on, heavy with promise and peril. Somewhere in the city's labyrinth, another stone tablet waited to vanish, and with it, another story poised on the edge of oblivion. Elias knew the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the detective in him would not rest until every line between shadow and truth was drawn clear. "We keep going," Elias said, voice low but resolute, "because the city deserves to know what's carved beneath its surface." And with that, the rain swallowed their words, carrying them into the restless night where debts and destinies collided beneath the unyielding gaze of stone. The chill of the underground chamber seeped into Elias Carr's bones as he stepped inside, a faint flicker of candle flames casting long wavering shadows across the cracked stone walls. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of burnt incense and something metallic, an acrid tang that pricked at his senses. His trench coat, damp from the relentless rain above, clung to him uncomfortably, but he barely noticed. His sharp eyes scanned the room, noting the strange juxtaposition of the ancient and the modern, faded runes etched deeply into the stone floor, partially obscured by a sleek, humming panel of technology that blinked with cold blue light. Elias knelt cautiously near the arcane altar at the center of the chamber, tracing a finger over the worn symbols. They whispered of old debts and forgotten pacts, of oaths carved in stone long before the city's ledger system had been born. Yet here, beneath the city's surface, those old powers were twisted and harnessed by new illicit means. He felt a shiver ripple through his spine, not from cold, but from the dark realization dawning on him. This was no mere bureaucratic corruption. It was a melding of forbidden ritual and cutting-edge technology, designed to erase debts not just from the ledger, but from existence itself. A soft click echoed from the far side of the chamber, and Elias spun, hand inching toward the revolver concealed beneath his coat. Lena Marsh stepped into the dim light, her auburn hair damp and tousled, eyes alight with the same mix of fear and resolve that had driven her since they began this investigation. "You found it," she whispered, voice trembling yet fierce. "The vanishing point. It's real." Elias nodded grimly, rising to his feet. "And it's worse than I imagined." Together, they examined the intricate mechanisms embedded in the stone altar wires coiled like serpents, sensors blinking in rhythmic pulses, and faintly glowing sigils They flickered with unnatural energy. Lena leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "This technology," she murmured, "it's not sanctioned. It's forbidden, smuggled in from the black market, combined with ancient rites to destabilize the tablets. Whoever's behind this is playing with fire." Elias's mind raced. The implications were staggering. Not only could debts be erased illicitly, but the very foundation of the city's justice system was being undermined by forces few understood and fewer dared confront. Later, back in Lena's bookstore, the rain hammered relentlessly against the windows, a steady percussion that underscored their urgency. The shop was a maze of dusty shelves and dog-eared volumes, the air thick with the scent of old paper and ink. Lena spread a collection of forbidden documents and photographs across the worn wooden table, illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of ledger entries marked with strange, cryptic symbols. "These debts vanished overnight, without repayment, without a trace. It's the same pattern we saw with the victim." Elias studied the papers, tracing the data with a furrowed brow. "And everyone leads back to Victor Gray's circle." "Exactly. He's not just a corrupt official. He's using this technology to erase debts that threaten his power." The weight of their discovery settled heavily between them. It was a dangerous game, exposing the nexus of ancient magic and illicit tech, one that threatened not only their lives, but the fragile balance of the city itself. The next day, Elias found himself in the cold, sterile expanse of Victor Gray's office. The room was a fortress of elegance. Polished black stone surfaces gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, every corner immaculate and devoid of warmth. Victor sat behind an enormous desk, his sharp features bathed in the glow of the city's neon lights filtering through the rain-streaked windows. His gaze was ice-cold, unblinking as it met Elias's. "You're poking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Detective," Victor said smoothly, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The ledger system is my domain. I maintain order." Elias's voice was steady, dry wit barely masked beneath his weariness. "Order? You mean control. And corruption." Victor's lips curled into a faint, disdainful smile. "Power is the only true debt, Elias, and I intend to collect." The tension was palpable. A silent battle of wills played out in the sterile room, where every word was a weapon. Elias knew this was no mere confrontation. It was a warning, a test of his resolve. That night, outside the precinct, Elias met with Detective Marcus Vile. The fog was thick, swirling in the glow of distant streetlights, muffling the sounds of the restless city. Marcus lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his gruff, weathered face. "You're digging too deep," Marcus said, exhaling smoke that dissolved into the night. "This goes beyond dirty cops and crooked officials. It's bigger than us." Elias met his friend's eyes, the weight of shared history between them. "I can't walk away. Not this time." The cigarette burned low as they stood in silence, the city's heartbeat thrumming beneath their feet, a world built on debts carved in stone, now threatened by forces eager to erase the past and rewrite the future. With every step forward, Elias felt the walls closing in, the vanishing point drawing nearer. The question that haunted him was no longer if he could solve the case, but if he could survive the truths he uncovered. The ledger was not just a record of debts. It was a battleground where power, memory, and justice collided. And in that shadowed war, some stones would shatter beyond repair. The rain outside intensified, tapping a relentless rhythm against the windows as Elias stared into the darkness, stone pendant cold against his chest. He whispered to himself, a bitter vow: no debt goes unpaid, not if I can help it. But in the city, where debts vanished like shadows at dawn, even the hardest stone could crumble, and some truths might be lost forever. The cramped backroom of Lena's bookstore was alive with the rhythmic hum of the old printing press, its steady clatter echoing off the cracked brick walls. Freshly inked pages spilled from the machine, each one bearing the raw, unvarnished truth about the ledger system's corruption. Lena's hands moved with practiced precision, stacking the sheets with care, as Elias watched silently from the shadowed doorway. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of damp paper, mingling with the undercurrent of tension that seemed to pulse through the city's veins. "This is it," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the press. "Once these hit the streets, there's no turning back." Elias nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the room, always alert to the dangers lurking just beyond the flickering candlelight. Victor Gray won't take this lying down. We need to be ready for what comes next. Outside, the city was a restless beast. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting the fractured glow of neon signs that buzzed intermittently, casting fractured light onto the wet stone sidewalks. Elias stepped into the night, the collar of his trench coat pulled tight against the chill. He paused at a street corner, the faint murmur of voices and the distant clang of metal on stone weaving into the city's nocturnal symphony. Somewhere in the shadows, he knew, eyes were watching, waiting. Victor's enforcers were already moving, their presence a dark stain on the city's fragile calm. Back inside the precinct, the atmosphere was heavy with smoke and quiet tension. Elias and Marcus sat across from each other beneath the harsh glare of a single overhead bulb, the weight of their shared mission pressing down like the unyielding stone tablets that marked the city's debts. Marcus's gruff, pragmatic voice cut through the silence. "You really think this will change anything?" Elias met his gaze, eyes steady despite the fatigue etched into his face. "It has to. The truth's the only thing that can crack this system wide open. But it's going to cost us." Outside, the city's underground pulsed with uneasy energy. Word of Lena's publication spread like wildfire, whispered in shadowed alleys, and whispered over cracked tablets in dimly lit taverns. The ledger's corruption was no longer a secret, and the city trembled on the brink of upheaval, caught between the weight of its debts and the promise of redemption. Elias returned to Lena's bookstore as dawn crept over the horizon, the first fragile rays of light casting long shadows through rain-streaked windows. Together, they faced the uncertain future, bound by the knowledge that some stones, once broken, could never be set right. Yet within that fracture lay the possibility of something new, a chance to rewrite the story etched into the city's heart. The whisper of turning pages, the distant echo of footsteps, the flicker of neon in the rain, all bore witness to a truth that refused to be silenced. And as the city stirred awake, Elias Carr braced himself for the storm that was coming, knowing that the fight for justice was far from over. The night held its breath, and beneath the surface, the ledger's secrets whispered in the dark.